On the 18th of April 2021, 12 of Europe's biggest clubs came together to announce the Super League, an invitation-only competition meant to rival the Champions League. But just 48 hours later, and the project had gone up in flames, and in this video, we'll be looking at the failure of the Super League. At the forefront of this was Florentino Perez, the president of Real Madrid, who for years had been frustrated with the UEFA Champions League and how it works. Back in 2009, he stated, "We have to agree a new European Super League which guarantees that the best always play the best, something that does not happen in the Champions League." He wasn't the first to suggest this, as in 1998 the Italian company Media Partners proposed a Super League, but this never amounted to anything. That same year the G4 team was formed, and in 2003 it was reported they were considering a Super League, but yet again this fell flat. Perez was undeterred by these past failures though, and patiently waited for the right moment to bring his Super League plans to life. That moment came in 2020, with the pandemic halting football and stadiums being left empty when it resumed. Football clubs faced a massive financial hit as costs remained high, but their revenue plummeted. For Real Madrid and Barcelona, two clubs drowning in a combined €1 billion worth of debt, the Super League would have provided them financial salvation, and they knew they could convince other top clubs to join. Compared to the Champions League, the Super League was far more financially rewarding. Winning the Champions League can be worth up to €85.1 million in prize money, in addition to television income, but if you go early, you'll be making much less. Simply signing up to the Super League, however, meant the clubs would receive a €200 to €300 million welcome bonus. On top of this, the larger prize fund meant the founder clubs were guaranteed between £130 to £213 million each season. With these clubs also having massive global fan bases, the Super League would have had lucrative sponsorships and TV deals, with not a single penny going to UEFA. Also, the empty stadiums as a result of the pandemic appeared to play into the Super League's hands, as there wouldn't be in-stadium protests, although this couldn't silence the fans and their outrage. The Super League would have had 20 teams split into two groups of 10, and after every home and away match had been played, 4 clubs from each group would qualify for the knockout stage, which would have operated just like the Champions League knockouts. One of the big controversies was that the founder members were exempt from relegation, meaning they could perform poorly and still be guaranteed an immense amount of revenue each year based solely off their status. This highlighted the Super League's disregard for sporting integrity and how it's fixated on the size of a club's fan base, as more fans equals more money. There were also fears the Super League would increase the revenue for the Big Six while cutting the income for the other top tier teams, since broadcasters would be unlikely to pay as much for the Premier League. With the Premier League funding clubs in the lower leagues as well as grassroots football, had the Super League gone through, this funding likely would have been reduced. Fast forward to the 18th of April 2021, and it broke out that the English clubs had signed up to a breakaway Super League. Upon hearing this, UEFA, alongside the relevant leagues and football federations, released a preemptive statement condemning the Super League. Then, at 11 PM that night, the 12 clubs involved officially announced the Super League. UEFA, who were the most threatened by this breakaway, fired back, with their president Alexander Seferin stating the players that will play in the closed league will be banned from playing in the World Cup and Euros. The ESL had prepared for this though, as it was reported it had already filed motions in courts to prevent the footballing authorities imposing bans. The ESL had anticipated UEFA's threats and weren't scared as a result, but one thing they hadn't anticipated is just how overwhelming the voice of the fans would be. Protests erupted across England, with thousands taken to the streets determined to force their club's owners into abandoning the Super League. On the day Chelsea played Brighton at Stamford Bridge, their team bus was blocked entrance into the stadium by hundreds of protesters, which caused kickoff to be delayed. The teams at other clubs were equally as hostile, and with some owners already being on thin ice like the Glazers at Man United and the Kroenkes at Arsenal, this Super League stunt was further harming their reputation, which put pressure on them to pull out. Some managers also openly opposed the idea, with Pep Guardiola for example criticising the Super League by saying it's not a sport if you can't lose. Many players were against it too, with Jordan Henderson calling an emergency meeting with the other Premier League captains and later tweeting, "We don't like it and we don't want it to happen." Even the British government got involved, with them pledging to stop English clubs joining the European Super League. With the pressure mounting, all 16 English clubs began the process of withdrawing from the Super League on the 20th of April, just 2 days after its announcement. While the backlash was less intense in other parts of Europe, some of the remaining clubs saw little point in persisting, which left just Real Madrid, Juventus and Barcelona. In February 2023, a manifesto for a reinvented Super League was released, but a few months after this, Juventus left the Super League, meaning Real Madrid and Barcelona are the only remaining clubs. It's unlikely a resurrection of the Super League will actually happen, as in 2021 it was reported the Premier League were introducing a new rule, which would mean clubs would face instant expulsion from England's top tier should they join a breakaway league. Without the English Big Six, who are some of the most powerful clubs on the planet, the Super League would be far less appealing.